All right, so something else that's really important, especially when we're talking about our relationships, is that we check the facts. Checking the facts is a common skill that our therapist will say, like, can you just check the facts on that situation? Because oftentimes there is an event, there is that spark where our brains say, this is now the urge that's a good idea, or this is the thought that I'm now going to run with. And that doesn't always fit the facts of the situation. So events fuel our thoughts, which fuel our emotions. Events also fuel our emotions, which fuel our thoughts. And so it's really important for us to check the facts of situations, because when we are set off by our thoughts and our emotions, that can lead us to believe that those are facts, and they might not necessarily be. For example, since you guys are home, there is going to be a lot of communication going on, or a lack of communication going on. So sometimes we might interpret things that mom, dad, brother, sister, self have said as like, that person is out to hurt me, or they purposely made me feel bad. So those are our interpretations and our thoughts about the situation, which can lead to increased unpleasant emotions, either about that relationship, about that person, or about ourselves. And so when we allow our thoughts and interpretations to be the facts of our reality, that can lead us to more intense emotions, more misery, honestly. And when we allow our emotions to fuel our thoughts, the same can happen. And so it's really important for us to be able to check the facts of a situation so that our thoughts and our emotions are not the driving truth in our life. Because without the facts, we can't problem solve. And at the end of the day, that's what we really want to do, is to be able to problem solve what's going on here. So, in order to check the facts, what we first need to identify is, what is the emotion that I'm trying to change? Okay, so what we want to do when we are checking the facts so that our emotions and our interpretations don't become the driving force of our reality, we really do get to stick to the facts so that we can problem solve situations. What we first want to do is identify, what is the emotion that I want to change. So if you are sitting at home and you are feeling sad, you are feeling shameful, you are feeling guilty or resentful or whatever it might be, identifying what is that emotion that I'm trying to change and that I don't want to sit with anymore. You then want to ask yourself, what is the prompting event that led me to this emotion? And when we're thinking about relationship mindfulness, when you're identifying what that prompting event is, really, again, sticking to that non-judgmental stance, observing and describing what exactly happened. That's a fact check all in itself. So identifying what were the events that prompted me to feel this way. Then, once you're able to identify that while challenging those judgments, challenging those black and white thoughts that might drive your emotions higher to a point where you might not be able to control them. Once you are able to check those, you then want to think, okay, what are my interpretations and thoughts about this situation? So this might be a point where you do start to identify, what were some of my judgments here? What are my judgments? What am I assuming about the other person? What does that make me assume about myself? Really starting to get into, what is my brain and what are my thoughts now telling me is truth and might not necessarily be. So then you want to ask yourself, once you are able to sit with those interpretations and really sit with, is this true? Is this a fact? You then will be able to, hopefully be able to debunk some of those assumptions and some of those myths that you are telling yourself.
And I think also in this space is where you want to start to look at how might the other person have experienced this, or the other person, how might us as a whole family, how might each of those family members have experienced this? So this is where you also want to look at the other sides, right? All sides of the situation, because you may have experienced it in one way and family member A may have experienced it in a different way than family member B did. And so you really want to look at all sides of the situation and validate that for many of us, we have been, in emotion mind or letting emotion mind be in the driver's seat for a really, really long time. And so check the facts is hard. So we really want to take this step by step. What's the emotion? What happened before? What are my interpretations and other people's experiences? And we want to make sure that we're slowly moving through these steps as we start to learn, check the facts.
Absolutely. So once you are able to sit with those and really process what's going on there, it's also important to recognize what is the threat in this situation here. Because oftentimes we do feel such intense emotions and our brains do start to fuel us with these assumptions and these interpretations because there is a threat there. So what is the threat? And being really honest, the threat might be, if this is true, I don't have control anymore. And that can be a really scary place to be. Or if this is true, the thoughts that I am having might be true. And again, that can be a really scary place to be. So identifying your threat and then imagining yourself kind of handling and coping with that threat. Or we oftentimes say, go to the catastrophe. If that is the threat, what is the worst possible case scenario? And can I recover from it? Again, it is really important to think about that wise mind that Brooke just talked about. In wise mind, can I handle this? Will I be able to cope and recover from this potential catastrophe in this situation here? And so oftentimes we will have to problem solve. We'll have to cope ahead. There also will likely be some radical acceptance, which will give you some of those skills too. And it is important to recognize more often than not, we will be able to recover from these threats. We will be able to recover from this catastrophe. And so really just imagining, how do I do that? And start to plan ahead for it.
And the last question we do want to ask ourselves is, does my emotion and its intensity fit the actual facts? And this is a really important part to highlight because sometimes the emotion might fit the facts, right? We might be in a situation where it is really valid to feel angry or sad or guilty, and the intensity might not fit the facts, right? So if, for example, Bree did not return my phone call for 4 days, right? Sadness could be a really, really valid emotion. And, being that we're coworkers and friends and we know each other pretty well, sadness at maybe a 10 or a 20, right? Something that I can handle and really just say, hey, Bree, you didn't return my phone call. Now, if I was sad at a 100, would that fit the facts, right? Knowing all that I know about our relationship and knowing all that I know about her and how busy we are as therapists and in our jobs, would sadness at a 100 fit the facts? Probably not. But would sadness maybe at a 10 or 20 fit the facts? Yes. And so we do also want to remember that sometimes our emotions are going to be valid, and because we experience emotions so intensely sometimes, that intensity might not fit the facts. And sometimes, on the other side of it, sometimes you are going to experience an emotion that doesn't fit the facts, right? If Bree didn't call me back for 4 days and I was angry at a 100, I would say that emotion probably doesn't fit the facts, knowing all that I know about our relationship and how busy we are. And so sometimes we will notice our intensity doesn't fit the facts, and other times we will notice that our emotion doesn't fit the facts as well.
And sometimes we can help ourselves figure that out by asking, does my behavior make sense given this emotion? Or do my urges make sense at this intensity given this current situation? And that can be really helpful to really start to figure ourselves out and better understand the people around us.
And so as we get started, what's the emotion? What happened? How intensely am I feeling it? And does all of that fit the facts?